Hey everybody, Daniel here. If you're watching this video, chances are that you're in your 30-day trial of TTB Tamer, or you just want a refresher on how to most efficiently use TTB Tamer. This video is an attempt to give you a high-level overview on TTB Tamer, and then I'll also be making individual videos specific to making entries, making processes, reviewing your entries using the batches and entry log pages, and then diving deeper into some more topics. But if you ever need any help or clarification on something, please feel free to email me. You can use the email that's linked in the Contact Us button in the navigation bar in the software. Great, so let me start by saying that there are 3 steps to using TTB Tamer in order to go from brand new or just starting out to having completed reports ready for submission to the TTB. The first step is to make entries for activities that occur in the brewery. We recommend doing this daily at the end of the day. The official stance from the TTB on record keeping is that records need to be up to date within 1 business day. The second step is to take a look at your entries and inventories that are calculated in the software to make sure that they make sense. And then the last step is to print the reports, double check them again, then submit them to the TTB. So let's take a quick look inside of TTB Tamer. Step number 1, you'll be making entries. To do that, click on the navigation tab and then you'll go to the Make Entries page. Currently, there are 2 available options after clicking this link. The original Make Entries page, we also call this the old Make Entries page, and then the new Make Entries page, and we start calling this the Processes page. The old Make Entries page is what we have used since the beginning of TTB Tamer to allow people to make entries. The good thing about this page is that it lists out every entry that you might need to make for an activity that takes place in your brewery. The bad thing about this page is that also it lists out every possible entry you might need to make. And so it's like drinking from a fire hose. In general, it's also more difficult to use this page to make multiple entries for different batches or different dates, because essentially you would need to make every entry one by one. There's really no way to make entries for different dates or different batches all at the same time. The processes page is our attempt to make things easier and provide more flexibility in how you make your entries. Whereas on the old page, you would only be able to see all of the available options. On the process page, you would be able to create and save custom groupings of entries that only show you what you want to see. And then you can recall these to make your entries when needed. It's these custom groupings of entries that we're calling processes. For example, you might create a brew day process that contains the entries for beer produced, materials used, and maybe liquids added in the cellar if you tend to add water to your wort to hit a specific starting gravity. By doing this, you don't have to worry about getting confused with all of the remaining, over 130 other options available. And then you might create another process for when your beer is done fermenting. And it would contain all your entries like transfer from the cellar to bulk, loss from the cellar to account for your trub. And then again, you would create an additional process for your kegging or bottling, canning processes in the brewery, and then a final process for sales and removals. And so by creating processes like this, you can customize exactly what you want to see in TTB Tamer so it follows your brewery setup. And then at the same time, it's easier to use because you don't need to drink from the fire hose of all the available entry options every time you need to make an entry in the software. Check out the video titled Creating Custom Processes for a more in-depth overview of how to create a process and explanations of the available options to do that. But for now, even if you're a brand new account and haven't created anything yet, there are 3 processes available for you that have been pre-created. And you can get to them by clicking here in the search tab at the top of the page. These processes are labeled Show All Questions, Typical Brewpub, and Typical Production Brewery. The Show All Questions process will essentially show you everything available to you on a single page, a bit like the old entry page. The Typical Brewpub and Typical Production Brewery processes will have a limited selection of entries that are typical for those kinds of breweries. I'll pull up the Typical Production Brewery and I'll make a few entries with it to show you how to use it. So after this page is loaded, you can see that we have groups such as beer production, materials used, racking and bottling, losses, beer sales and consumption, and then other options for destroyed beer, beer removals, etc. So let me make a few entries here. Let's just say that I had a brew day this morning, and here it is at the end of the day, and I'll make that entry to tell the software how much beer that was fermented. So let's say that I have a 7-barrel brew house, and I actually made 5 barrels of this beer. Just as a side note, if you instead prefer to brew in gallons, you can select that here, and then the software will do the calculations into barrels for you. But to keep it simple, I'll just say that I brewed 5 barrels. And then so you would enter in your batch number. So for this, let's say I did a new batch. And then the target date would be the date that it actually took place in the brewery. So I'm going to enter in that it took place today. Today is the 1st of February. And then you have optional comments that you can make. So for example, if you wanted to track, the brewer who made the beer, you could do that. So I'll just put my name. Or maybe you want to track your starting gravities, you can do that as well. And maybe even your color, if you wanted to track that. And so that's it. After you have entered the amount of beer that was fermented, the unit, pick a batch number. You can pick from ones that you've already made, or you can create a new one like I did here, the target date, and then any additional comments, you're good to go. Let me make one more entry for racking and bottling, just so we have a better example of what we can do here. So let's say that also this afternoon, I racked some kegs. So let's say I made 18 half-barrel kegs of my nitwit. And again, that was also today. And again, any optional comments. So if you had, keg serial numbers, you could list those out here. And then these comments will be saved along with your entry. All right, so let's say I'm done for my entries for today. I brewed this morning and then racked some kegs. Let's hit save. All right, so you can see here I have a little receipt that shows up. Again, showing me the entries that I made, beer fermented, and the amount I fermented, and then the beer I racked to kegs. And let's say that's everything I needed to do today, so it looks good. So now I know what you're probably thinking. How do I know what's going to happen to my brewery in order to make these processes? How can I see into the future for something that might happen, like if we need to dump a batch, or we have returns, or a case is dropped and accidentally, bottles break everywhere. And so that's why we've created this other area here, quick entries area, or make a quick entry. If you have something in the brewery that happens that's not typical, like beer returned to the brewery, you can make a quick entry for that event without needing to first create a process for it. So you would just find the entry that you need to make here in the category area. So let's see. Here we go, beer returned to this brewery in kegs. And let's say, a restaurant returned to 6-barrel kegs of our nitwit. And then I would pick the date today. Let's say this happened yesterday. And then I can make optional comments again. So and then I can just click save. And then you can see here our entry was saved. So that's an easy way to make a quick entry for things that don't really fall into a process in order to make the entry. Okay, so that was the first step in TTB Tamer, making entries. Let me show you now how to review your entries and check to make sure that they make sense and agree with what's actually happening in your brewery. So the best way to do this, in my point of view, is to go to the batches page. Now this is assuming that you're actually using batches and batch numbers inside of TTB Tamer to categorize all of your entries. I strongly recommend that you do this. If you don't make batches or use batches with your entries, then your entries won't show up on this page, and so it wouldn't apply to you. But as you can see here, this basically just lists all of my entries and categorizes them below the batches here. So for example, here's the batch I just made an entry for. And you can see that I made an entry for beer fermented, and it was 5 barrels. Let me pull up another one here that has a little more entries to it. Okay, so for this IPA, you can see that I made an entry a while back for beer fermented, and it was 10 barrels. And then other entries I made, I transferred some of this to our racking bulk for carbonation. And then after it was done carbonating, I made an entry for racking to kegs, and it moved it to this column here. And then you can also see that I made another entry for losses here in our cellar due to Trube. We'll get back to that in a second. And then you can see here, I made 2 sales entries, 2.5 barrels for sale in kegs. And then it looks like I sold 2 sixtel or 6-barrel kegs to my tavern. So it's really nice to see how all of these entries are adding up into your individual inventories here at the top. And for example, on this page, you can see that I accidentally have a negative 0.1 barrels in my fermenter. And so I can take a look at my entries and say, okay, so what did I do wrong? Or what do I need to adjust in order to zero out this inventory? Because obviously you can't have a negative amount in your fermenter. So I can see here that, oh, I accidentally made too much of a loss entry. So instead of 0.35 barrels, I'll just switch this to 0.25. And you can see that that zeroed out my inventory for my cellar. So to save this, I would just scroll up here to the top, click the save button. And there you go. That's how you would adjust an entry in order to zero out a negative amount. Other things you can do on this page, you can obviously delete an entry if you find that you completely made something incorrect. And you can also filter for an entry here in the filter window. And so you can filter down to see only exactly what you want to see if you need to do that. You can also do a partial search. I don't know if I have any test batches that would show that. Oh, I do here. So for example, if I only want to see the batch numbers that start with 2018, I can search for a partial batch number. I don't have to search for a complete one. And I can pull up batches that are, just showing 2018 in the title. And this is really helpful if you put your beer name at the end of your batch number, and then you can quickly search for just your beer name and then pull up all of those batches. So the other way to take a look at your entries would be to use the entry log. And essentially, this is just a flat list of all of the entries that were made throughout time. So for example, I have an area for users here. You can see who made the entry. You can see the type of entry that was made. The creation date is the date that you accessed the software in order to make the entry. The target date is the date that you selected when you made the entry, that the event actually happened in your brewery. And then you can see here batch numbers. You can also edit this if you need to. And then obviously the amount, which again, you can also edit here directly on the page. So you can see that if you want to get more information about this entry, you can select the info button and it will show you, the original input that you did was 18 of your half barrel kegs, which then converts into the 9 barrels that is shown here on the page. And then any additional comments that you may have saved with your entry. At the bottom of this page is the filter area. So let's say, for example, I only want to see the entries that were made for January 30th through February 1st. And then I would be able to filter down all of my entries into just that one time window. So this is really helpful if you just want to see, what did you do for the month or what did you do for the quarter. You can also do a filter for specific categories. So let's say I only want to see beer fermented. And then it would only show me that. Or if I only wanted to do a specific batch. So let's say I only want to see the brand new one that I did today. And then I can filter it down to just the batch that I wanted to see. If you'd like more information on how to use the batches and entry log pages, please check out the video titled Adjusting and Managing Your Entries. In that video, I will cover more making adjustments, handling rounding errors that occasionally happen if you use the conversions, and then exporting your entries into spreadsheets and other more detailed topics. All right, so that's the second part of using TTB Tamer. Let's cover the third part, which would be making your reports. To do that, now just visit the Make Reports page, and you can see here I have three options available. I have my daily report, my report of operations, and then my excise tax returns. So daily reports are essentially just a record of what happened in the brewery for the day. These are never submitted to the TTB per se. The TTB requires you to have daily records on hand that show what happened in the brewery, whether that means having a dedicated computer where you can pull these PDFs up, or if that means printing out hard copies and keeping them in a file cabinet at your brewery. To create a daily record, you would just select the date you want to do that for and click go. We use the same format as the report of operations, so it's easy to follow if the TTB ever had any questions. So essentially, the daily record for today, my inventory, that was my starting balance on hand. I had 33.27 barrels in my inventory. And you can see here I produced 5 barrels from that entry I just made. And then if you scroll down a little further, you can see that I made an entry for beer fermented. And again, 5 barrels and any of my additional comments and the batch number. To create a report of operations, visit the Report of Operations tab. All of your previous reports are collapsed here, and you can, again, print those out as you need to. And then your current report is listed right here. You just click on the printer icon, and again, it spits out a PDF. And some red flags that you should be warned about is if you see negative amounts. Obviously, again, you can't have negative inventories. So if you see negative amounts, you want to get that corrected before you submit that to the TTB. And then when you're done with that, you would print this off and sign and then mail it in, or you would use your pay.gov account to essentially transpose all of these numbers to the electronic form that you would find in pay.gov and submit it electronically that way. And essentially the same thing for your excise tax return. All of your previous returns are collapsed here. And then when you need an excise tax return, you would print that out. We've already calculated the amount that you've owed based on the amount that you said that you sold. And so you either print this out and mail it in with a check, or again, use your pay.gov account and submit it electronically. So if you'd like more information about creating reports, what exactly are daily records and why are they important, what needs to be in a daily record according to the TTB, and then how to read the operations report, please check out the video titled All About Records and Reports, where I'll cover that information more in depth. Okay, so that's the basic 3-step process of creating reports in TTB Tamer. First, you make entries. You would create your process and then recall them when needed. I showed you how to make a quick entry for sporadic events. And then the second step is to take a look at your inventory amounts to make sure that they make sense. So you would use the batch history and your entry log to review your entries and zero out your batches. Again, making sure to take care of any negative inventories that might show up. And then the third step is to create your report. So you can create daily records every day, and then your operations report and excise tax return whenever you need to file those. Again, if you have any questions, feel free to email me, Daniel@ttbtamer.com or info@ttbtamer.com. Those emails come directly to me as well.